All right, so let me approve this recording request here that we have. And I just want to tell everybody hello and thank you so much for joining us today. I know we've gotten off to a late start from some Zoom bombing that happens every once in a while, but this is going to be a great presentation. So let's just get right into it. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and my company Screen Time Clinic. If you have any questions as we go through, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll address them at the end. But I have seen your questions ahead of time and I'm going to discuss those in a moment here. But to get right into it, my company Screen Time Clinic specializes in educating parents and corporations, employees, adults, as well as children and all in between about digital wellness. It's a fairly new area of the industry, but the research has been going on now for over 10 years. It's a very well-funded studies, lots of information out there that unfortunately has not been very mainstream until recently here. And it's our mission to share it with you. So for this presentation, the main idea, if you have to log off now and don't remember anything else, we just want to reiterate that technology is a tool, not a toy. And even though we get sucked into using it as a babysitter and a distraction, the presentation today is really going to open your eyes as to why this should be avoided, not to use it as a toy, not to use it as a pacifier. Remember how hard it is to pull babies away from a binky and a blankie or nursing. So screen time is even more addictive than the blankies and the nooks, and should not be used before bedtime because it causes dysregulation. And it also shouldn't be seen as a coming of age tool that once you reach a certain age, you're just automatically gifted the tool. So a little bit about me, so you know where I'm coming from. My background is in teaching. I have an extensive teaching history over 15 years. I still do some high school teaching, but my main focus right now is on digital wellness and those presentations and content creation. My passion for this, I wrote a children's book, which I have with me today here, Screen Smart Sam. If you have any little ones, I highly encourage you to take a look at it. It's a great way to prove that you're not the crazy parent, that this really is something that children should need to be concerned about. And it's an awesome book, but it came out of my own struggles with my own children. They're now young adults in college, but I could go on and on about my own story. That's not why we're here today. If you care to hear more about that, you can probably find more information online. But trust that I am here with you. There's no judgment. This is a journey. There's no right or wrong way for all children. This is a very individual challenge, and it's a very new challenge with the digital natives that we are bringing up now, that this wasn't previously an issue with other generations. So I want to say that you are not alone to be rightfully concerned. And a lot of times it's the mothers that notice this. I know we just had Father's Day a couple of days ago, but mothers are usually the ones that see the little changes or the big changes and notice the cause and effect of screens. And it's really important that you pat yourself on the back for noticing. I'm so glad you all could be here today with me. I know our time is valuable, but I think it's important to go over all these different areas that we had people send us questions and concerns. This is from your group, only from Brain Balance, but the concerns, I've done many presentations and they're all pretty much the same, from kids are being too obsessed, always want screen time, what science says, too much screen time is concerning. My partner and I have different feelings. I'm telling you, I was a single mom for 10 years. And even if you're a single mom or you're married, it's very common that the partners are not on the same page. And I'm going to tell you how to accomplish that tonight. And then we have the littles now too, that little ones are being exposed to phones and devices. We're having attachment issues where babies are looking at devices rather than staring into their mother's eyes. And that's becoming more and more problematic. And we're seeing how these symptoms on the autism spectrum greatly mirror those of digital media overuse. That's the common term today for these challenges that are so obviously found here that many of you sent in. So thank you so much for filling out that questionnaire. It's really nice to see that ahead of time. And I think it's helpful for you guys to see from one another that you're not alone, excuse me, in your concerns. So to get right into it, we're going to talk about the how and the why before we talk about the solutions, because I know for me and so many others, it's just very overwhelming to know, why should I be so concerned? Is this really an issue? And how can it be such a problem? And why is it causing such big concerns? So let's talk about these two different areas of screen time. So we give a big caution sticker to passive screen time, which is more educational, slow content, educational content without cartoons. Think of like sitting back, watching something. Distance learning, so far, nobody's been addicted to online learning or schoolwork, but it doesn't come without risks, especially for those on the autism spectrum or those who are more susceptible to overuse. So even parents that are saying, oh, he or she only watches Sesame Street, and then we have meltdowns, that can even be problematic. So the better, and we'll talk about smart screen swaps, but the different types of screen time, we do have passive, and then we have the interactive and the leisure screen time. And these are apps and games and social media. They're very fast paced. They have reward structures. So even your traditional learning games. I know a lot of you put in the questionnaire, like, I want my child to accomplish or to be learning. What kind of learning programs? The short answer to that is that really pen and paper, outdoor play, nature play, all of the old school learning ways is being proven to be much, much, much more beneficial than anything they could possibly learn on an iPad, all the way until they enter kindergarten or TK. 2D learning is not the same as in-person learning. Even head, shoulders, knees, and toes isn't the same receptive as it is in person. So if you're wondering if your child's going to be behind, don't worry, and don't try to over stimulate them with learning before necessary. So if we look at this digital media use spectrum, this was actually way back in 2011. And even back then, we had a fairly significant range of addiction, a great area of overuse that is presenting symptoms of overuse, and then a very small healthy area. After pandemic, that has grown to about 45%, some studies show, of addiction in children and young adults, because the earlier children are exposed to screens, the more likely they will become overuse and or addicted to it. So this visual representation really shows the development of your children's brains. And young children are much, much, much more sensitive to visual stimulation. That's why if you hold up your phone and the bright light to it, it has more power than morphine. So that's why a lot of doctors let you show screens to your kids when they're getting shots, or if they are in true pain from some sort of trauma. They do even use VR goggles now for surgeries and recovery. It is super, super powerful for the pathways. But this also means that it's very, very important that youngsters all the way up until 20s, I know we only have suggesting and control of them maybe till 18, but it's important to know that we really need to be careful for as long as possible, because as you look at that gray matter developing and the overstimulation that can occur, the younger the brain is when they're starting to build that gray matter, and more screen time results in less gray matter. And that is proven with a lot of cross-sectional MRIs. I have links to those studies on our website in the resources page if you're interested. A great book that talks about this, the risks and who is at risk, because I know sometimes we have parents that say, oh, my daughter could care less about screen time. We don't monitor it. We don't limit it. It's not a problem. So what is working for one type of child and one family should not be parlayed over to another and taken at face value. So many children, especially those on the autism spectrum or those exhibiting symptoms on the autism spectrum, can be considered for more at risk of overuse. And there is a great book, part of our educational journey at Screen Time Clinic. All my educators, we have read tons and tons of books about this. So this is one book, Reset Your Child's Brain, and it talks about a 4-week plan to a screen detox. It's an excellent book. And if you have any doubts that removing screens will help your child, I know as a parent, I want to do anything I can to help my children. That's why I took screens away when I realized the implications. When my son was 14, he was being diagnosed with autism, ADHD, and we completely removed screens, and he took up flying and rowing and got all these different hobbies and interests that he never would have otherwise. And those symptoms did almost completely resolve themselves without so much screen time. But this is because it takes 25 years for the frontal cortex to develop, and they are more susceptible to addiction of all types before of age 25. That's why when alcohol use of minors, it's not just a society norm, it's actually to protect their brain. If they are using drugs or alcohol, they are much more susceptible to having problems later in life. This is why we really want to limit screen time as adults for our children to protect them from these struggles that I'm now being paid thousands of dollars by corporations to come in and give speeches and give guidance on how to reparent themselves and put those bad habits that they learned as young adults, teenagers, that carry into their adult lives. So we really want to set our children up for success and do what we can, because even 30 minutes causes blood flow to shift away from developing frontal cortex, causes atrophy of the brain, physically smaller brains, less gray matter, and that's from scans, as I mentioned before. It also wants the user to want more and more. So even if you think you can regulate their screen time, particularly very photosensitive and addictive programming, so like Cocomelon and very high-paced, intense visual stimulation, very small amounts of that will cause them to want more and more. So here's a little video about how this works.
According to Dr. Milham, these reactions aren't necessarily because of an addiction to gaming. Instead, what we witness in these videos are children who are victims of their own biology.
Being able to tolerate the feeling of frustration or that moment of sadness when you decide, I'm not going to continue doing this, that is crucial.
One of the reasons the children in these videos find it so hard to control themselves is because they don't yet have a fully developed prefrontal cortex.
The prefrontal cortex is a key component in the brain that's involved in helping us to control impulses and urges. When you have something like the video game being turned off suddenly, the child is faced with having to feel those negative emotions.
Another factor is dopamine, which is often referred to as the brain's pleasure chemical, because it's associated with feelings of euphoria, motivation, and concentration.
Dopamine is a key component of regulating reward mechanisms in the brain. The stimulation we receive from playing a video game impacts the same pathways that are present when one is becoming intoxicated with a substance. So it's no surprise that many of the behaviors and reactions that we see for a child who's struggling with having this sudden stop brought about in their video game playing has analogs to someone who is being asked to stop usage of a substance.
Let's say a child is about to eat a piece of candy. The anticipation of eating that candy gives the child a spike of dopamine. Then their parent yanks that candy away from them. That action will cause a drop in dopamine, which will upset the child. Video game designers have gotten remarkably adept at keeping gamers entranced with a steady source of intermittent rewards. More rewards means a constant stream of dopamine released into the brain throughout gameplay. So when a parent pulls the plug on a child's video game, there's an even more powerful effect.
Video games are inherently designed to be stimulating and exciting and to draw us in, and that to some degree is a healthy phenomenon. It's just that for some it's more difficult to control than for others. Is the video game somehow impairing their ability to function in the home, at school, or with other children? If we're not seeing any problematic behaviors and it's just concern about the frequency, then I think we can work on just trying to bring the frequency down.
For many households across the country, meltdowns over video games are a very real part of everyday life. Parents we have spoken with say they find themselves in a battle of wills with their children when they tell them to turn off a video game and do homework, eat dinner, or go to bed. Dr. Milham recommends implementing 2 basic rules. Number 1, establish clear and consistent rules about the days and time of gameplay. Number 2, enforce a transition period between gameplay and bedtime. Dr. Milham also recommends that parents be wary of an underlying problem. Games may just be a coping mechanism.
One of the most important things is to really curb the video game playing and monitor it and put interventions in place before it's a problem. Once the video game playing becomes a problem, at that point, the parents will probably need to seek guidance from whether it be therapists, counselors, or other care providers in order to help to assess and deal with the challenges at hand.
Like us. So that's my mission with our presentations, is really to prevent these crisis moments because by the time children are 10, 11, 12, they have already had way more overuse of gaming just from innocently seeming Roblox, Minecraft. Those are very, very addictive programs, and they do have a high risk and rate of predators and also unsavory content, just like we saw in our Zoom bombing episode today on the Zoom before we started recording. So, and as far as friendships online, I get this question a lot also, that we want to curb the online game playing. They should have a take it or leave it attitude. And because that dopamine is constantly on their mind, it is very hard to do, and it puts parents in a difficult place. So our recommendation, if you have littles, is to obviously not even allow it, don't even start it, and to find alternatives, because the friendships they make in gaming do not mimic friendship qualities that you have in real life. They are all conditional qualities online. So on to more brain development and screens. This is actually a picture of some of our youth advocates that are in Kansas City that were doing research with their peers about screens. And you would not believe, I just finished teaching a couple high school courses, the amount of teenagers that say that their parents need to limit their own screen time and their siblings' screen time, and can see problems in their own siblings and in themselves that nothing is being done about. So I know it's difficult to parent. There is nothing easy about parenting anymore, but you are making the right choice by guiding your child and putting in fail-safe ways to go about limiting and monitoring and keeping them safe from overuse and other content. As we know, social media, more and more, the Wall Street Journal that produced that segment of video, they have an article almost every day now in the parenting and tech section talking about the risks of largely social media and gaming. Social media has been linked to serious mental health issues, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and other health issues for children, teens, and adults. Social media platforms are not a place for children. They are all unregulated. It is all adult content, and there is no possible way to keep your child safe and to protect their mental health if they have access right now to Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, any app. You need to know exactly what is on it. And as they're older, you need to help co-regulate it, but there are new regulations going through Congress that want these companies to not make their programming so addictive and to regulate the content for under 13, but even over 13, or it should be over 18 because there's so much pornography and illicit material, violence. I just can't impress upon everyone enough how out of control social media is and the harm that it does to children with their brains. They don't have the processing skills like adults do to differentiate reality from fiction, and the visual impact is much greater than what you and I see. So with that said, these new studies are coming out every day. I have alerts about screen time, overuse, and the correlation between autism spectrum disorders, hyperarousal. This is a very, very well-studied area. And it's just now starting to get parent attention. So again, I really commend all of you for showing up today and being curious about this topic and open to the ideas that changes should be made no matter what age your child is. It's never too early. And unfortunately, sometimes it is too late to make major changes because we want to protect relationships. When they're older teens, it's very difficult. You can't just take it away cold turkey after you've allowed so much dependency for so many years. But again, that's a case-by-case situation. So another great book, Hooked on Games, talks about these artificial highs and lows, reduced focus stamina in school. We see that children cannot sit still and teens cannot sit still and write and listen to lectures because of this online learning is decreasing their focus stamina. So even though online learning isn't addictive, it still affects the nearsightedness of their eyes, changing the shape of their eyes, and it affects their focus stamina, that they can't sit still and focus on content for an extended period of time. And we can notice that even as adults, it's hard for us to focus on content that might not be as stimulating as others. So I try to make this as interesting as possible, but I know we all struggle with it after the pandemic. It does put excessive stress on your nervous system, fight or flight, especially with gaming, where little nuances might not seem like a big deal to non-gamers, but for gamers, they are in a constant state of hyper awareness. And yes, there are some surgeons that have played video games, and I get the question, but the gaming is good to teach them computer skills, but everything is super intuitive these days. You don't need to be a gamer to know how to be a programmer. And programming is something that you can learn in high school and college. It's very, very different and complex than these coding schools that are popping up. That's just another way for kids to play video games and access the video games. So please, I know a lot of dads especially think that their kids need to know about coding and be computer savvy at an early age, but it's really not a skill. And we have plenty of studies proving that too, that it's not, the risks are not worth the perceived benefits of that. College students, this is a recent study, who used social media excessively made more trips to the doctor and had higher levels of a protein linked to cancer and cardiovascular disease. We see this in adults too, in adult digital wellness. So if social media stresses you out, you have a good reason for that also, because it really doesn't matter your age. The algorithms are extremely intense and meant to keep you there as long as possible. and create some really complex problems for adults as well as children. Some other problems other than those on the autism spectrum that we see behavioral problems or challenges learning is the technique from learning, looking down all the times, headaches from looking at screens, excessive pressure on the spine and lungs from being hunched over, obesity rates, of course, possible harm from EMF or the microwave radiation. And then we're seeing many more studies just since the pandemic about eye myopia and damage from the blue light and from looking at screens close by, whereas sitting and watching a movie in a full-length movie far away is much better than watching a short-paced clip on YouTube close by. It helps focus stamina and protects your eyes. So the next area that we're going to cover before we get to the solutions, I know we're almost there, is pornography. And we must talk about this because the largest group of internet porn comes from ages 12 to 17, even younger than 12. There are predators and the images that they view are very, very inappropriate. So unless you are ready for your child to be a full-blown pornography consumer, I would highly recommend that you not allow access to social media at all until it is more regulated by the government, or if you share an account that you have absolutely proof that you know what's going on. Take a look why.
There's pretty good documentation that the earlier someone is exposed to really explicit pornography and sexual imagery, the more likely it is that they're going to have compulsive and addictive problems around their sexuality as an adult. Because that 9-year-old does not have the emotional and biological development to be able to really understand what the meaning is. He knows it's incredibly arousing and amazing and distracting and fun, and it feels good to look at, but their brains are really not ready to handle it.
Our sexuality is wired into us. The most sexual organ is between our ears, not between our legs. So when you are developing your brain sexually, what happens is that pornography begins building that script. This is the way we're supposed to think about it. And so when a young person views pornographic material, they're neurologically now starting to put bricks in this wall of kind of building the structure of what sex means.
Adolescent brain is not an adult brain with less experience. It is in a unique place. It is anatomically, physiologically, and biologically different. And what occurs during adolescence is several brain changes that have a purpose. And the purpose is to become very excited about sensation seeking, about rewards, about sex. And it's to become wired up, actually changing the structure of the brain to wire up to the environment. And it has been shown to occur with nerve connections. The way nerves connect and intertwine is really the basis for all learning and all memory. So what occurs is around age 11, the adolescent brain prunes down these connections until you're set with the connections that will perhaps last a lifetime.
Pornography is a teacher and modeler of sexual templates, particularly when they're modeled early, because it's a powerful neuroplasticity device. Neuroplasticity means that our brain changes, and we change when we want and when we learn. And we have seen it in pornography now. People who are watching pornography compulsively, their brains look different from those that are not.
A leading researcher said recently to me, we are in the midst of the single largest unregulated social experiment in human history. And what he was talking about was the inundation of the brains of young children with content that they're not prepared to deal with. And what it is doing is normalizing behavior that is going to affect, particularly young boys, is going to affect their view of women, their view of relationships, their view of the world.
All right. So there's a full length of this video on my website on the resources section. And before we get on a little bit further into this, I did see a question from Katie about how can we know if screen time is being used for auto-regulation or if it's an addiction? And the best answer to that is that you can view screen time as similar to a drug and alcohol abuse. So even if you're using it for regulation purposes, it is not the drug of choice. There should be other tools that children are being used to self-soothe, to self-regulate, and to be in control of their bodies and their minds without screens distracting from those feelings and their practice regulating them, if that makes sense. So it's looks like it may be calming and dulling, like if you have a temper tantrum and you give a child a screen, or if they're having a meltdown and you give them a screen, it pacifies in the moment, but it over stimulates. Even though their bodies seem calm, their minds are being overstimulated. So it's the same risk and effect as if you had a bad day at work, come home and drink a 12-pack of beer or even one beer. It's really not the best. You should learn how to meditate, read a book, go for a walk, use some tapping techniques. And those are all being not covered nowadays because screens are so readily available. So that's a great question that I don't think we explicitly talk about in here. So as the video is talking about online predators and safety, and the big thing here is that trust does not apply online to your children and their activities. You cannot teach trust online. And this is the biggest fallacy that I see in mom groups online, in chat groups. I let my child have social media. You need to trust them. They need to be able to have their independence. They need to be able to have privacy. There is no such thing as privacy online. You cannot trust a teenager or a child or even yourself pretty much on social media because the design is so intense. The artificial intelligence is just so beyond what we can conceive of. It is not a place to teach trust. Trust, build again, build trust in other ways with your children. And it's not about them. It doesn't matter what type of great child you have. We all think our children should be trustworthy, but it cannot apply online. So to give you some statistics about sexting and sex and pornography, please believe me when I say it is really, really an issue. This is the biggest social issue we're having these days is the culture of disrespect online, the rampant, unregulated content and the sharing of photos, and the children are creating their own pornography, which every year, lots of kids, even in San Diego, locally get in trouble for things that they're sharing between each other and explicit photos that are shared. And I'm going to talk about ways that you can prevent this also in the next couple of slides. And I promise we'll wrap it up just a little bit after 8:30 here. This is another video that I'm going to wait and have you guys look again on that resources link if you'd like to view it. It has a great video about how these predators, again, they're very, very common, just like the Zoom bombing that was going on our presentation. The internet is the biggest place for predators, and they all know how to access your children, their information, what to say, how to pretend. It's very, very real, and it doesn't matter how much money you make, what type of income, what you do. They are at risk every time they're connected to the internet, whether you're at your house or someone else's house. So we want to be extra vigilant, eyes wide open, and take precautions. So with this next part, we're going to talk about identifying some bad habits that we can turn into good routines. So some of the common bad habits that we see are removing devices at random times. You know, we have to take responsibility as parents. I was terrible giving my kids screens when they were little. I used it. Baby Einstein, my mom sent me a photo of my son could barely move. He was on tummy time watching Baby Einstein. I mean, nobody had any idea about the ramifications. So when it came time to take them away, I had a big mess on my hands, but we are the parents and we need to make really conscientious decisions now and be the parents and be the ones to make this place safe for our children. So don't remove them at random times, set up a schedule. Don't use screen time as a reward. It disincentivizes doing the tasks that are necessary to build healthy routines. You should be helping your family with chores because it's important to help your family, not because you earn a smoke break or a screen time break. You shouldn't have to read a book for an hour to get to play video games for an hour, because video games are very addictive and it makes kids hate reading, quite frankly. So we want to teach reading as a way to relax before bedtime and indulge ourselves in a book that we can really grasp onto the story. Unclear rules and consequences drive everybody crazy, adults and kids alike. So we want to set up rules or new rules as soon as possible. Do not use in bedrooms, cars, bathrooms, and remember the dangers of any app rated 13 plus should really be 21 plus, in my opinion. 18 plus is all we're going to get, because once they turn 18, of course, kids want to make their own decisions, which is fair enough if we've gotten them to that stage. And giving smartphones before establishing risks and readiness. So we want to do good things. We want to have smartphone alternatives and use parental controls. And I'll tell you about those alternatives. We want to pick a time for maybe an hour a day of screen time, if any. Plenty of parents that have children with autism spectrum disorder and those symptoms do a complete screen detox and remove screens altogether for just 2 weeks. And they see such a tremendous improvement that they actually cover up their TVs and don't allow any screens. I know it sounds extreme, but it's worth considering doing a 2-week total detox to see the changes in your child, because I promise you, you will be amazed. And certainly intervention techniques and really good programs like brain balance and tutoring centers, none of that is very effective if it's all being washed away with screen time at home. So we really want to set our children up for success with clear rules and consequences, reading before bedtime, and having the rule of no computers, phones, or iPads in bedrooms, cars, and bathrooms is a dangerous place. Our best advice is to set bedtimes early. And I know that's hard to do with summer solstice is today, and it's just now getting dark out. But the earlier, the better that you can start these bedtime routines, because of their cortisol and the way the body's hormones go. Have some early bedtimes, teach sleep and prioritize it. Sleep training does not end when children are 1, 2, 3 years old. You need to help preteens and teens really take their sleep seriously. It's one of the most protective behaviors that we can have to keep screen time in check, is having healthy bedtimes and absolutely no phones in bedrooms, because teens and young teens, preteens will wake up and check their phones in the middle of the night, or they will be distracted by them. Even the sight of a phone is proven to show anxiety. Brain Balance recommends setting a go to bed alarm. Sleep is critical for development. Yes, and that go to bed alarm should be way earlier than most parents think. Like, get your shower, get your book, and really get that routine going. It's easier than you think it is. I will tell you that from all the families that I worked with. So the next solution that is unique to Screen Time Clinic is really working on a family plan, because this isn't a list of rules that we're going to staple to the wall and tell our kids, guess what? We just watched a presentation and there's no more screen time and we're throwing them all away. And this is this, and I'm the boss, and that's that. I know that's the way I presented it when I didn't know any better. And trust me, that does not work. So we want to outline a family plan based on your values, ideally getting both parenting partners on board. And the best way to do this is talk about family values and how are you going to teach these family values, because they don't come from time online. And the more time your child spends online and your teen spends online, the less time they're having developing all these qualities that earlier generations absorbed from just being out in life. So that's our first tip, is a family media plan, and I'll show you how to do that. We also have this great list here, and I know it's too much to read over right now, of smart screen swaps for littles, because a lot of you had youngsters that registered for this. And there's a lot of things that you can do right. Choosing screen-free story time like Tony's or smart speakers rather than screen time. So lots of different alternatives, but it's better to decide on screen time with babies before they view a screen, even for the first time, before it becomes a problem, before conception even. We know parents that watch a sports game and put their baby facing them rather than the screen, even though it's cute, you know, to have your baby cheering on for their favorite sports team in their outfit, but they shouldn't have that visual stimulation of the bright lights. So we have a responsible use pledge when it does come time to have a smartphone or a safe phone, with clear expectations that technology access is a privilege. You are never gifting any child a phone. It is not their right. It is not a gift. It is actually not even their device. It belongs to you as a parent who pays for it. It should be able to be accessed by you at any time, because nothing on the internet is private and nothing on their phone is private either. It's very easy to hack. Any pictures they may have could easily end up public. So we want to talk about what's illegal, what's unethical. Many teens don't know that they shouldn't be sharing explicit photos, that that's actually a felony of child porn distribution when teens share other explicit photos of each other. Don't know what bullying is. They don't know what racist rhetoric is online. Because it's so normalized online, they don't even realize that it's not appropriate. And then for more responsible use, you're going to outline how much time you're going to allow, passcodes, whatever you decide, walk through it and make an intentional plan. The other big component is not only planning to limit, but also how you plan to monitor, because even if you only allow 1 hour of screen time, it's essential to monitor it. So now there's a new organization called Wait Until 8th Grade for personal phones for kids. They even want to push that into high school. But distraction-free phones are the latest and greatest. I have one here. It's called the Gab phone. We have Cosmo, Pinwheel, Cosmo Great. That's the picture on the right there. They make a great first device that you can put the little smart watch in their backpack. They shouldn't have it on them all the time when they're young. But these distraction-free devices look like smartphones, and they are very, very safe. Because iPhones, I kid you not, the 8-year-olds can hack them, even with the parental control settings. So those are the golden standard, just like seatbelts were invented for cars. And then monitoring apps like OurPact is one of our favorites that can take screenshots. If you do allow a smartphone screenshot, you can live view at any time what your child is viewing. You can read their texts. You can go crazy knowing every single thing about them. literally crazy, but it is good assurance that they are using it appropriately. And when children and teens know that they are being monitored, they act more responsibly. And then to schedule, track and plan off times. I know as children get older, you would think that your play dating and your activities slow down, but it's really just beginning. We have to keep kids active in the day of the internet, because otherwise they will fall back on that. But if there are no other options, they will definitely fill their time with other things. So to finish up here, this last little section is how to reduce screen time. And if there are any other questions before we start winding down here towards the end, let me know. But this is the golden standard now, is only 1 to 2 hours per day. And that's if there's no dysregulation that's noticed, if they have a take it or leave it attitude. And again, I really encourage not to allow gaming even from the start. A lot of faith-based families are really strict about this because they see what a struggle it is. Social media really shouldn't be allowed. If you are not familiar with the risks and able to monitor it, and the golden standard should just be not to allow it. If you already have, of course, we can talk about ways to possibly monitor that, but it depends how old the children are. Usually they have many different accounts set up, secret accounts, by the time they're 14, if they're allowed to it by 13. But we are here to help, and that's why we do one-on-one coaching. Track your activities to see how much time they're getting outside and help them monitor their time. And then keep phones at home. Don't send them to school. Don't text your child during class. Leave messages with the office or the school. So many parents are pestering their children all day long. So please give them a break from being tethered to you. Let them not have a phone. Let them practice their social skills with their peers. Let them feel uncomfortable and have to start a conversation. Let them have a meltdown without their technology. This is all about skill building without using the crux of a device. And that's why teachers and coaches, they're all now being called on not to use social media as a communication tool to keep kids off of those. Know the dangers. Nothing is private. It's unregulated and unfiltered. Males are 2.9 times more likely to be addicted to video games than their counterparts. And the other thing is to have great stopping cues. Let me show you. This is a little box. This is the Play More Tech Less, Tech Responsibly. Behind me here, you'll see that big box with the locking device on it. There are boxes that look just like that one in my book that you lock devices away, put devices bedtime, out of sight, out of mind. Stopping cues: when you walk in the house, you put your phone away. When you go in the car, you put your phone away. When you go to the bathroom, you put your phone away. These natural stopping cues, if you build them into the routine, they will really get easier and easier and continue on for life, that you don't bring your phone into your bedroom. We have so many adults with intimacy problems because they are on their phones rather than paying attention to their partners later in life. So the struggle is real, and it starts as a child knowing how to set yourself up for success. Hopefully your parents model how to do it. But stick to the plan. You're the parent and you know best. This next one is essential. And the last bit of info I'm going to give you: guide and educate, but don't wait to convince, and stop constantly arguing. There is absolutely no way that you can convince a child, a baby, a teen to make a different choice with their screen time. It is highly addictive. They want it more than anything else because of how it's affecting their bodies. And you will not be able to convince them that this is the best pathway for them. So to calmly just educate them about routines and put those protective practices in place. You're the parent. You can remove all devices if you would like. put them all in your car, get a storage closet, take away all their phones. You are not going to harm them one bit. I know many, many parents that made a big change and love it. It's totally possible. And I'm here to help get everyone on board. And keep in mind that for kids, we only use technology as a tool, very sparingly. And that's it for today. So I think we are going to stop there. I have a whole media guide with printables for you guys. Everything that you've seen here, all the studies, you can download it from the website. And I'm going to stick around and answer some questions. If you want to end the recording now, we can probably do that. And I do have.
I want to say thank you. That was wonderful and everything and more. So I will stop the recording. For those that are on it, again, you will get to get a link to this. So let me stop the recording before we start answering questions.